The notification came at 8:52 p.m., right in the middle of the block party. I was standing near the grill with a paper plate balanced in one hand, talking to Mark about fence permits, when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I almost ignored it. The music was loud. Kids were running between lawn chairs. Someone had just cracked open another cooler. But the alert wasn't from my house. It was from the host's security app. Motion detected, interior hallway. That caught my attention. Ryan Brooks liked to show off his smart home setup. Cameras everywhere. He'd given a whole speech about it when we arrived. Just for liability, he'd said with a grin. You know how people are. I stepped away from the grill and opened the notification. The timestamp read 8:49 p.m. 3 minutes earlier, Lily had excused herself from our group near the dessert table. Said she was going to look at the home theater Ryan kept bragging about. On my screen, I watched her walk down a hallway I didn't recognize. She wasn't alone. Ryan was ahead of her, glancing back once, saying something I couldn't hear. He didn't lead her toward the theater room he'd pointed out earlier to the rest of us. He turned left, toward the back of the house, toward a section he'd specifically said was off-limits because it was under renovation. Lily followed. The door at the end of the hall opened. They stepped inside, and then it closed. The noise of the party didn't stop, but it felt like it did. I stood there staring at the screen while someone behind me laughed too loudly at a joke I didn't catch. 8:50 p.m. 8:51 p.m. The hallway stayed empty. I didn't move. I didn't rush in. I just watched the quiet frame of a closed door and felt something shift. Not explosive, not dramatic. Just precise. Like a measurement finally lining up. Up to that point, our life looked normal. Not perfect. Not dramatic. Just steady. Weekdays started at 6:15 a.m. I handled breakfast while Lily got ready upstairs. She liked quiet mornings. I liked routines. Coffee measured the same way. Lunches packed the same way. The sound of the garage door at 7:32 as she pulled out for school drop-off. I work operations for a regional supply company. Long hours. Concrete problems. Inventory, routing, labor scheduling. Things that either add up or they don't. I've always trusted numbers more than moods. Lily worked part-time at the elementary school and filled the rest of her hours with what she called overflow life. Errands. Volunteer coordination. Seasonal decorating. She was good at staying busy. Saturdays were for groceries and hardware stores. Sundays were slower. Pancakes, laundry, maybe a walk if the weather cooperated. We weren't flashy people. No dramatic trips, no loud arguments in public. From the outside, we were the stable couple on the block. If anything, we'd become predictable. The first changes were small enough to excuse. She started running errands that stretched longer than they used to. A 40-minute Target run became an hour and 20. She'd blame traffic, lines, running into someone she hadn't seen in years. Her phone shifted from being an object on the counter to something that traveled with her room to room. Face down more often. Screen dimmed quickly when I walked past. I noticed, but I didn't accuse. Everyone retreats into their phones eventually. Then came the fitness phase. Just trying to feel like myself again, she'd said. More walks in the evening. More time outside when Ryan happened to be adjusting something in his yard. He was the kind of neighbor who always had a project going. New lighting. A deck extension. Some smart home upgrade he wanted to demonstrate. Ryan was easy to like. Early 40s, confident without being loud. Organized the block party every year. Knew everyone's kids' names. Helped shovel driveways without being asked. He had that smooth way of talking that made you feel included. If Lily lingered in conversation with him, it looked social. Harmless. I told myself not to read into proximity. We lived 20 feet apart. Shared fences. Shared mail mix-ups. Shared complaints about HOA emails. There was no dramatic shift. No obvious red flag. Just slight adjustments in tone. She laughed a little quicker at her phone. Guarded it a little closer. Became slightly more defensive when I asked neutral questions. You're overthinking, she said once when I asked why she'd been gone nearly 2 hours for a quick run. Maybe I was. Work had been heavy. End of quarter numbers. Staff turnover. I blamed my restlessness on stress. At night, she'd roll toward the edge of the bed instead of into me. Not cold, just distant enough to notice. But I stayed in the version of our life that felt easier to believe. Normal. That's the thing about stability. It doesn't crack loudly. It shifts a fraction at a time. And unless you're measuring carefully, you don't see the line bending until it's already moved. I stayed by the drinks table longer than necessary. Not because I was frozen, because I was thinking. The screen on my phone had already gone dark, but the image was still there in my head. Lily following Ryan down a hallway that wasn't meant for guests. The door closing without hesitation. No glance back. No pause. There's a difference between suspicion and confirmation. Suspicion asks for comfort. Confirmation asks for clarity. I reopened the app. Scrolled back through the event log. Ryan had granted temporary access to a handful of neighbors earlier in the week so they could view the camera layout before the party. I remembered him laughing about it. Transparency builds trust, he'd said. The timestamps were clean. 8:49 p.m. Motion detected. Interior hallway. 8:50 p.m. Door contact sensor, rear suite. No exit logged. I checked the saved clips. The system kept 7 days by default. Tuesday, 3:17 p.m. Motion detected. Same hallway. The clip loaded. Ryan walking ahead again. Different clothes. A woman behind him. The angle wasn't perfect, but the posture was familiar. Lily. Thursday, 11:42 a.m. Another clip. Same hallway. Same door. They didn't look rushed. They looked practiced. That's when the noise from the yard fully detached from me. Kids shouting. Ice clinking in cups. Someone arguing about football trades. It all sounded underwater. I zoomed in on Lily's face in the Tuesday clip. Not nervous. Not conflicted. Intent. There's a moment when your mind tries one last time to protect you. Maybe it's innocent. Maybe they're planning something. Maybe there's context you don't have. I let those thoughts line up. Then I looked at the pattern. Tuesdays and Thursdays. The same time she'd started running errands. The same afternoons she said she needed quiet time. The durations matched. The door sensor logs showed entries around 45 minutes each time. Not once. Repeated. I didn't feel anger. That surprised me. What I felt was alignment. Like numbers finally balancing after weeks of small discrepancies. The distance in bed. The extended store runs. The defensive tone. The extra effort in her appearance before quick trips. It wasn't random. It was scheduled. I stood there holding a plastic cup someone had handed me and realized something simple. I had been protecting a version of reality that no longer existed. Not because I'm naive. Because I prefer evidence before reaction. Now I had evidence. Clear. Timestamped. Stored in a cloud account Ryan probably assumed no one else reviewed carefully. I locked my phone. Slid it into my pocket. I wasn't going to storm into that hallway. I wasn't going to create a scene in front of neighbors and kids and folding tables. The truth was already established. And once the truth is established, volume becomes unnecessary. I didn't need to guess anymore. I didn't need to soften it with maybe. The line was straight. I just had to decide what to do with it. I locked my phone and walked back toward the drinks table. If you've made it this far, this story clearly caught your attention. If you're enjoying it, drop a like on the video. It helps me see what kind of stories you want more of next. Let's keep going. Someone was mid-story about a camping trip gone wrong. A circle of neighbors leaned in, laughing at the right beats. I stepped into the edge of the group and nodded like I'd heard the setup. Everything good? Mark asked, handing me a fresh soda. Yeah, I said. Just checking a notification. That was true. I stood there, steady, listening to a punchline about a raccoon and a broken cooler. My hands weren't shaking. My breathing wasn't off. The world hadn't tilted. That surprised me. There's a version of this moment where I storm through the house, open the door, and let the humiliation burn publicly. Where I drag the truth into the yard and force it to breathe under string lights and folding chairs. But that version is loud. And loud doesn't solve anything. Across the yard, I could see Lily's purse still hooked over the back of her chair. Half a glass of wine sweating onto the plastic table. She hadn't planned to be gone long. That told me something. This wasn't spontaneous. It was routine. I checked the time on my watch. 8:58 p.m. 9 minutes since the door closed. I did the math without meaning to. 45 minutes had been the average in the past clips. That meant I had roughly 35 minutes before she reappeared. Enough time to decide who I was going to be next. I excused myself from the group and walked toward the cooler near the fence. Not because I needed another drink. Because I needed physical space. The music shifted to something louder. Kids started a game of tag near the side yard. Ryan's voice carried faintly from somewhere inside the house earlier in the evening, confident and hosting. He had told everyone, clearly, that certain areas were off limits. renovation materials, liability. Insurance would kill me, he'd joked. I replayed that line in my head. Insurance, liability, rules. My chest tightened once, not from anger, but from clarity. This wasn't something I could fix by asking better questions. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a choice. Repeated, measured, and hidden inside a social environment designed to make it look harmless. I felt something settle in me then. Not rage. A decision. I wasn't going to try to win her back. I wasn't going to compete. I wasn't going to negotiate loyalty like it was a contract up for renewal. I would change direction, not volume. That distinction mattered. Volume creates chaos. Direction creates outcome. I pulled out my phone again, not to rewatch the clip, but to download it. The Tuesday and Thursday footage too. Quietly. No notifications triggered. Just files saved to a secure folder I use for work documentation. Habit. When something shifts in operations, you preserve records first. Emotion comes later, if at all. From inside the house, faint movement registered in the hallway camera again. I didn't open it yet. Instead, I stood there under cheap party lights and let the internal break complete itself. The version of me who assumed stability was gone. In his place was someone calmer, more precise, and already planning. The hallway alert triggered again at 9:34 p.m. I didn't rush to open it. I finished the conversation I was standing in, laughed once at the appropriate moment, set my empty cup on the table. Then I stepped away toward the side of the yard where the noise thinned out. Only then did I look. The clip loaded cleanly. The door at the end of the restricted hallway opened. Ryan stepped out first. He adjusted his shirt, not dramatically, just enough to register. A quick smoothing motion across his chest. He looked both directions down the hall, not panicked, just checking. Lily followed. Her hair was slightly out of place near her temple. She fixed it with 2 fingers, smoothed her dress, took a breath. Then they separated. He walked toward the kitchen. She paused half a second longer, then moved toward the main living area, expression neutral, rehearsed. Timestamp, 9:33 p.m. 44 minutes. Consistent. I watched it twice. No kiss. No obvious physical contact on camera. Just familiarity. Comfort. Practice. I exited the clip and returned to the event log. Scrolled further back. Last Thursday evening, block committee planning session. Motion detected, 7:12 p.m. Clip loaded. Different neighbor this time. Sandra Whitmore. Ryan walking ahead of her down the same hallway. Same door. Closed. I stared at that for a long second. Scrolled forward. 7:58 p.m. Door contact sensor, rear suite. 46 minutes. Sandra exiting. Adjusting her necklace. I felt something shift again, but it wasn't personal. It was structural. This wasn't just about Lily. This was pattern behavior tied to a physical space. A controlled environment. Restricted access. Private camera coverage. I went further back. 2 more clips over the past month. Different women. Same hallway. Same door. The only common variable was Ryan. And the location. I stood there under the faint hum of outdoor speakers and realized something important. What was happening inside that room wasn't spontaneous betrayal at a party. It was an ongoing system. One that relied on privacy assumptions and selective camera awareness. He'd told everyone the interior cameras were mostly decorative unless there was a break-in. That wasn't true. The event log was detailed, meticulous, and likely archived beyond the 7-day visible window, which meant 2 things. First, Lily wasn't unique in this. Second, this was bigger than a marriage problem. I zoomed in on the camera placement map inside the app. That rear suite was positioned beyond what most guests would naturally pass. Intentional layout. Intentional boundaries. I downloaded the additional clips. Not emotionally. Operationally. I wasn't going to send them to the neighborhood group chat. I wasn't going to walk up to Sandra mid-party and ask questions. Facts first. Interpretation later. Across the yard, Lily rejoined a small circle of women near the dessert table. She laughed at something one of them said, hand resting lightly on the back of a chair. No visible tension. No signal she knew I had seen anything. I didn't stare. I didn't track her movements. Instead, I reviewed the metadata attached to each clip. Camera ID numbers. Recording settings. Retention policies. Ryan's system wasn't casual. It was comprehensive. And comprehensive systems leave trails. The realization settled quietly. This wasn't about confronting 2 people. It was about documenting a pattern tied to liability, privacy, and misuse of shared space during organized events. What started as personal had crossed into something else. And once something crosses that line, it stops being handled privately. I locked my phone again. The party continued around me. But the framework had changed. By 9:50 p.m., I had everything downloaded. Not just the clip from tonight. The previous Tuesdays. Thursdays. The planning session with Sandra. 2 additional entries from earlier in the month. Each labeled, time-stamped, and stored in a private folder I use for compliance audits at work. I didn't rewatch them. I didn't need to. What mattered now wasn't what happened inside that room. It was where it happened. Ryan had organized this block party under the neighborhood events permit. He'd posted about it in the HOA group, collected small contributions for food and rentals, promoted it as a community event. That changed the framework. The cameras weren't the issue. The location was. He'd designated parts of the house as restricted due to renovation and liability. That was his phrasing. I remembered it clearly because he repeated it twice when giving the informal tour earlier that evening. Yet he had privately escorted multiple guests into that restricted area during official neighborhood functions. That wasn't just personal behavior. That was misuse of designated space under a community permit. I opened the HOA guidelines stored in my email. I keep copies of everything. Comes from years in operations. If a rule exists, I archive it. Section 4. 2. Event liability and restricted areas. Hosts are responsible for clearly marked access boundaries. Restricted zones must remain inaccessible to guests during permitted events. Violations may impact future event approvals and insurance coverage. I read it twice. Slowly. Then I opened the event flyer Ryan had posted weeks ago. His name listed as primary host. His address clearly printed. HOA logo attached. This wasn't about catching Lily. It was about documenting a breach. I compiled a short summary. Clean. Factual. No speculation. Dates and times of restricted area access during permitted event. Video logs confirming host-led entry. Repeated pattern over multiple gatherings. Duration inside restricted zone. I attached still frames, not the full clips. Enough to establish fact without distributing explicit context. I did not include commentary. I did not include accusations. I sent the packet to 2 places. First, the HOA compliance email. Second, the district insurance contact listed on the event permit documentation. Subject line, clarification regarding restricted area access during permitted event. That was it. I didn't send it to the neighborhood group chat. I didn't forward it to individual spouses. I didn't confront Ryan directly. Personal confrontation would have reduced it to emotion. Compliance review would elevate it to process. What happened inside that room was between adults making choices. But the misuse of event space under insurance coverage extended beyond that. If nothing came of it, fine. If something did, it would move through official channels, not through backyard arguments. At 10:07 p.m., my phone confirmed both emails delivered. I slid it back into my pocket. Across the yard, Lily was laughing again. Someone had started sparklers near the driveway. Music shifted to something louder. From the outside, the block party looked exactly the same. Inside the structure, however, something had already begun moving. Not loudly, not dramatically, but forward. I wasn't interested in punishing anyone. I was interested in alignment. And once facts leave your hands and enter systems built to process them, outcomes tend to take care of themselves. I picked up another soda, nodded at a passing neighbor, and waited. Not for Lily. For the natural next step. Lily found me near the side fence around 10:18 p.m. The sparklers had burned out. Kids were chasing each other in the dark with glow sticks. Most of the adults were looser now, voices louder, posture softer. She approached carefully, like she was checking the temperature of the air. "Hey," she said. "You disappeared for a bit." "Just getting some quiet," I answered. She studied my face for a second longer than usual. I kept my expression neutral. Not cold, not warm, just present. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes." A pause stretched between us. "I was looking for you earlier," she added. "Ryan was showing me the theater room. It's impressive." "The restricted wing?" I asked evenly. Her shoulders tightened, small, almost imperceptible. "He said it was fine," she replied quickly. "Just wanted to show me something about the wiring." I nodded once. I saw the hallway footage. That was it. No accusation. No raised voice. Just a statement. Her eyes flickered. Not outrage. Not denial. Calculation. You were checking his cameras? She asked. He gave half the neighborhood access earlier this week. I reviewed the logs. The music behind us felt distant again. It's not what you think, she said, softer now. I didn't tell you what I think. She swallowed. It was just conversation. He's been helping with the fundraiser planning. We needed privacy to go over numbers. Tuesdays and Thursdays? I asked. Her breath stalled. Excuse me. The timestamps are consistent. She looked away first. That told me more than any confession would have. I didn't mean for it to become something, she said, words coming faster now. It just happened gradually. I let that sit. No interruption. No correction. You've been distant, she continued. You're always at work. He listens. He pays attention. I pay attention, I said quietly. She flinched slightly. This isn't fair, she whispered. No, I agreed. It isn't. Another pause. She waited for anger. For pleading. For a fight she could respond to. I gave her none of it. I'm not going to argue here, I said. Not in someone else's yard. So what are you saying? She asked. I'm saying I'm not stepping back into a version of this where I explain my value or negotiate loyalty. Her eyes filled, but she didn't cry. You're just going to walk away? I'm going to move forward. That's it, she pressed. For tonight, I said. She searched my face for heat. There wasn't any. Only clarity. What happens now? She asked, almost quietly. That depends on whether you want to be honest, I answered. I am being honest. No, I said calmly. You're minimizing. That landed. Her posture shifted. The performance dropped for a moment. I don't know how to fix this, she admitted. I'm not asking you to fix it. Silence again. Somewhere behind us, someone started another song on a speaker. Life continuing. You're scaring me, she said. I'm not raising my voice. That's why, she replied. I nodded once. I'm going home in 10 minutes, I said. You can come with me. Or not. But we won't be pretending after tonight. She stared at me like she was seeing someone unfamiliar. Maybe she was. The conversation ended there. Not explosive. Not dramatic. Just shorter than she expected. And final in ways she hadn't prepared for. I left at 10:30. Not abruptly. Not noticeably. I shook a few hands. Thanked Ryan for hosting. Looked him in the eye long enough to register that I was fully present. He smiled the same practice smile he'd used all evening. Glad you guys came, he said. So am I replied. Lily walked beside me down the sidewalk toward our house. Not touching. Not speaking. The music faded behind us with each step. Inside our kitchen, the quiet felt different than it had that morning. She set her purse on the counter carefully. I didn't expect you to handle it like that, she said. There's no advantage in making noise, I answered. You already sent something, didn't you? It wasn't a guess. Yes. To who? Compliance. Her jaw tightened. You're going to ruin him. I sent documentation regarding restricted area use during a permitted event. That's not the same thing. It's accurate. She paced once across the kitchen tiles. This will blow up, she said. You know that. I'm aware. You didn't even talk to me first. I talked to you tonight. That's not what I mean. I leaned against the counter, arms loose at my sides. What would have changed? I asked. She didn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. Nothing. At 8:12 a.m. the next morning, the first email came through. HOA compliance, acknowledged. Requesting clarification and additional review. At 9:47 a.m., the district insurance office replied. Subject, urgent, restricted area access confirmation needed. By noon, the neighborhood group chat lit up. Has anyone else noticed the compliance email? What's this about restricted zones? Did something happen at the party? Ryan posted a short message at 12:14 p.m. There seems to be a misunderstanding regarding camera logs. I'll address this privately with the board. Privately didn't last long. By 2:30 p.m., Sandra Whitmore's husband had posted. If restricted areas were used during HOA events, I expect transparency. Another neighbor chimed in. My wife mentioned a private tour during the planning meeting. Was that part of the permitted space? The timeline was no longer controlled by Ryan. It was moving on its own. Compliance scheduled a site visit. Insurance requested footage retention confirmation. The phrase permit review appeared twice in one thread. I didn't add a single message. I didn't react to any speculation. I simply forwarded the original clips to the insurance contact when requested, maintaining the same neutral tone. Meanwhile, Lily moved through the house differently. Quieter. Watching her phone. At 4:05 p.m., she received a call from Ryan. I heard her voice from the other room. I didn't know he would do that. A pause. No, I didn't tell him. Another pause. It's not just about us anymore. That was the first honest sentence she'd spoken about it. By evening, 2 other husbands had privately requested access to the camera logs. Ryan's confidence in the group chat thinned. Words like audit, suspension, and temporary ban surfaced. I didn't orchestrate any of that. I didn't need to. Once facts enter systems, they move through channels designed to evaluate them. By Thursday, the HOA announced all future neighborhood events were paused pending review. Ryan's annual hosting privileges were under reconsideration. And in more than one quiet driveway conversation, timelines began surfacing that sounded familiar. Tuesdays, Thursdays, 45 minutes. I stayed out of those discussions because this was never about pushing anything forward. It was about not standing in the way once the truth had traction. And truth, when documented properly, rarely needs help. By Friday, the house felt different. Not hostile, not loud, just stripped down. Lily had stopped trying to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. The compliance emails were no longer theoretical. The HOA had scheduled a formal review. Insurance had requested a full audit of event footage for the past 90 days. Ryan's name was no longer attached to the upcoming fall festival. It happened quietly. No dramatic announcement. Just a revised calendar sent out, with temporary reassignment noted beside his role. Across the street, his driveway stayed empty longer than usual. Inside our house, the air was measured. We spoke when necessary. About the kids' schedules. About dinner. About logistics. Nothing personal. On Thursday night, she sat across from me at the kitchen table. I didn't think it would unravel like this, she said. It didn't unravel, I replied. It revealed. She looked down at her hands. I never meant to hurt you. I believe that, I said. That surprised her. But intent doesn't change impact. She nodded slowly. I kept telling myself it was separate, that it didn't affect our life. It always affects it. Silence settled between us again. This time it wasn't sharp. Just final. I don't know who we are after this, she said. I do, I answered. She waited. We're 2 people who don't pretend anymore. She exhaled, long and unsteady. I thought you'd fight harder. For what? I asked calmly. For us. I won't compete for someone who already made a decision. That was the closest I came to saying it directly. The next morning, I met with an attorney. Not out of anger. Out of alignment. We discussed separation terms. Asset division. Timelines. Calm, structured steps. No theatrics. When I returned home, Lily was sitting in the living room without the television on. I talked to him, she said. I didn't ask which him. It's over, she added. I nodded once. That doesn't change what happened, I said. I know. For the first time, there were no excuses in her tone. No softening language. No deflection. Just acknowledgement. That was enough. Over the next week, practical conversations replaced emotional ones. Separate accounts. Calendar adjustments. Sleeping in different rooms. There was no shouting. No door slamming. Just movement. Slow and deliberate. Across the neighborhood, the noise died down too. Compliance concluded the review. Official warning issued. Hosting privileges suspended for a year. Insurance documentation updated. Ryan stopped making eye contact when we crossed paths. I didn't need him to. What I felt wasn't victory. And it wasn't revenge. It was quiet. The kind that comes after you stop trying to force outcomes. The house grew still in the evenings. Not empty. Just honest. Decisions became simpler. Conversations shorter. I stopped replaying the hallway clip in my head. Because it wasn't necessary anymore. The facts had done their work. And so had I. Life didn't explode. It adjusted. 2 months later, the paperwork was filed. We moved through mediation without theatrics. Assets divided cleanly. Schedules redrawn. Conversations limited to what mattered. Lily rented a townhouse across town. Close enough for convenience. Far enough for clarity. The neighborhood settled into a new rhythm. Another couple hosted a smaller fall gathering. No cameras mentioned. No restricted tours offered. Ryan kept to himself. His name stopped circulating. Sometimes I think back to 8:52 p.m., the paper plate in my hand, the hallway on my screen, the door closing with quiet certainty. That was the real moment. Not when she admitted it. Not when compliance stepped in. When I stopped explaining things away. I trust signals now. Patterns. Timelines. The small shifts in tone that tell the truth long before words do. I don't feel anger when I pass that house. I feel distance. And distance, I've learned, is peace when it's chosen. The story kept its local nickname, of course. Neighborhoods always label things. My wife slipped away at the block party. The host camera told me why. They say it like gossip. I hear it like a reminder. When something doesn't add up, measure it. And once the line is straight, follow it. Quietly. That's the end of this story. If you made it all the way here, consider subscribing to stay with us. I've placed a couple of recommended videos on screen for you. Pick one and keep watching. I'll see you in the next story.